Con. I'm joined by Future on the stage, and between us, it is none other than Matt Hawkins.
Hey,
welcome back.
Thank you so much. Good to be here as always.
Yeah, we had you yesterday to talk about the Warframe comic, but today we're going to talk about Top Cow and how to break into comics. And I really can't think of a better person to ask about this.
We've been bringing so many artists and writers into comics over the years. Sometimes I look at the who's who's of the big books at Marvel and DC, and a lot of those are artists that came out of our studio.
That's fantastic. How many roughly would you say you've published over the years?
Oh, books? We've done about 3,000 books.
Holy moly. So where do you guys sit on the process of, you said some of your artists that come through you go into these much bigger projects, but they do a lot of really big projects with you. So it doesn't seem like, are you really where comics start? Is there a level before you?
There's definitely, I think the biggest way for artists to get into comics now is to do web comics, like publish free comics online, like Line Webtoon, Tapas, and some of these things, even DeviantArt or Facebook. People build up a small following. I think as a publisher, see, I'm a creator and a publisher, but when I'm publishing a book, I always think of it, it's a business, and you're like, I need to sell 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 units to break even. Does this person have any sort of a following? So it's a bit counterintuitive, but you almost have to build a following to get in.
Yeah.
And I think people think that it's easier than it is. One of the things I always say, especially about writing comics, there's only about 300 or 400 people that write comics professionally as a full-time job.
That's a very small number.
Yeah. Wow. And you look at the NFL. There's what, 900 people in the NFL. And the average NFL career is 4 or 5 years. The average comic writer career is 40 or 50 years.
Wow.
So there's just it's
not a lot of turnover there.
Yeah, very difficult to break in as a writer, but people do it all the time. It's just and most of the people today that are doing it, they'll publish a webcomic for free. They'll start to build a following on social media. As a person who hires people to do books and takes on projects, I will always look at does this person have a decent social media presence? Do they interact? And it's usually pretty easy on our end because we see these people that buy followers. But
there's ways to check.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you have 100,000 people on your Facebook page, but no one ever posts except for you, no one likes it, knows what, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's fake. Same thing with Twitter. You look at the interaction, so it's easy to. Don't waste your money buying followers. It doesn't help.
Yeah.
Would you say it's easier or tougher to get yourself kind of out there today? I feel like there's more avenues,
right?
But it also means there's a lot of people putting their stuff out there, so it's tougher to separate yourself. How do you differentiate yourself? How do you break out and break away from the crowd?
It is so difficult because it's something that we face all the time, that we'll put out projects that get lost in the shuffle.
Right.
And we're part of Image Comics, which
There's
is
so
one of the big
much good
studios.
stuff out there.
Yeah. I think it's just it's a long tail effect now to where it's a 5 to 10 year process, and sometimes for projects where you put them out, you sort of stick with it. And that's the nice thing about creator-owned books. Like, I own all the work I do, and the first book I wrote was 23 years ago, and I'm still selling it. I'm still selling it downstairs.
Wow.
I sold about 20 copies this weekend. So
that's really cool.
For something that I've been done with for 23 years, So you just add, and every time you put out a new book, there's a new marketing opportunity. You're right. The barrier to publish online for free is lower than ever.
Low.
So you can, with Line Webtoon, Tapas, and these other platforms, you can just put stuff up, and you can immediately start talking to people and building a following. It is much harder to make money than it used to be.
Really?
Yeah, much harder.
So, I mean, this is how to break into comics, and I think I can't even express how useful these segments are, the opportunity to pick your brain, and so I want to really make sure we get, for the people out there who want to break into comics, a step-by-step. So, like, what is step one? I'm sitting in my room, I've got a great idea, got the pencil in my hand. I mean, what do I need to download? What account should I set up right away? How soon should I set up my social media before, where I am in the process? Should I show people my little doodles and they can watch me evolve, perhaps, or another way?
It depends on if you're a writer or an artist or both. I mean, for an artist, it's actually very easy to get visibility because you just post your art. Like you say, you doodle, people can see your evolution. It's really easy to look at an artist very quickly and see whether they're professional quality or not. There are a lot of people that are very deluded about their skills, and we deal with that almost daily, where people will bring up portfolios and they're like upset they're not getting work. One thing I would say is if you're looking for feedback, actually genuinely look for feedback. Don't look for validation. We get that all the time where people, they ask for notes and then they get annoyed when you give them to them. And when you're on my side of the fence and I'm hiring people, if people get annoyed at me, I'm done with them.
Yeah. Well, what's the biggest mistake that a lot of people come to you with the first time they're trying to get noticed?
Wow, that's a massive question.
Right. Oh, well, all right. Let me ask it first for the comic writers and then for the comic artists. So,
Right.
You know.
Well, there's a few things comic writers do that drive all of us nuts. The one thing I would tell you and caution you is less is more. If you're trying to sell a pitch or a story, keep it succinct and short. I get a lot of pitches that are like a 50, 60, 70 pages. When you're reading stuff on our end, you don't. Here's the really kind of crappy secret of it: is we're looking for a reason to stop reading it. Okay. So don't give me one. So if you're writing something, if you do 30 pages, if you write a 3 or 4 page document, have a couple pieces of character design, that really is probably the best pitch packet you can do. And the dirty secret about writing too is no one wants to read scripts. You know, I mean, there's many famous stories about, and this happened to me, where a friend of mine asked me to read his friend's script. I did. A friend of a friend, and I wrote up some notes and gave it back. And then 3 months later, my friend says, "Why were you an asshole to that person?" And I'm like, "Wait, what?"
I gave them my time. I gave them my thought process. Wow.
So you know, and so there's people like when people bring me projects and ask me for notes, I don't do that for free actually. I know plenty of people that will do freelance editing. I don't do it anymore.
That's consulting. That's a job in itself.
Yeah, but you'd be amazed at what people will ask you. Hey, will you read my 500-page book and then give me detailed notes and copy edit it for me?
So I can get really mad about it.
Yeah, you do all this work for free and then you get yelled at. That's the best.
Yeah.
So
And then not listen to the feedback at all, anyways. Yeah.
Humble goes a long way. You know, I mean, I always, artists, the great thing about artists is if you're an artist, go to other artists and ask them for a feedback and actually listen to it. You know, I mean, one of the guys I think who gives a really good art portfolio reviews is Eric Larson, who's here and he's downstairs. He's a little brutal about it, but I love the guy because he's very honest. So if you want an actual honest feedback on your art, you can take it to Eric. And there's a lot of people that do formal portfolio reviews. Like I will do portfolio reviews, but people ask me for feedback, but that's actually not why I'm there.
Right.
I'm looking to hire artists, and I can tell by looking at the artists if they're professional quality or not, or if I want to work with them personally or not.
Do you ever have a situation where maybe someone's not working out currently in that moment, and you maybe give them feedback, or they come back to you later having refined whatever it was that wasn't working, and maybe something does grow from there? Yeah?
No, absolutely. I think that's where coming to conventions is absolutely great.
Cool.
I've had people come to conventions and show me their work. I see it the next year, and I see it the third year.
You've seen the progression from there.
And they listen to you, and those are absolutely people you want to work with.
Awesome.
So with the when the artists bring you work, you know, I feel like that's a little more instantaneous on your side. Like, what do you look for right away to say this is an artist that can do a lot and be very consistent versus, you know, maybe someone needs to work more?
It's all about storytelling. You know, it's like if you look at the panel, break down the sequential pages and see if they can actually tell a story. And I don't need the word balloons with the art. I should be able to follow what's going on. There needs to be like an action and a reaction. You know, if you show some guy swinging his fist, you need to show what the reaction of that is. When you don't need to show him hit him necessarily. You can show a swinging fist, then show the guy flying back. And you sort of read between the lines and the panel borders, and you can figure out what's going on in the story. So storytelling is absolutely key. You know, basic things like anatomy and life drawing go a long way. But I'm a little more flexible. If I find an artist that's got really good ability to storytell, those are the ones that we will probably try to pick up and try to help and maybe try to make them a better artist. Because I think it's actually easier to learn some basic anatomy and things like that than it is to physically storytell. That's one of the harder aspects of it.
So when you're here at these conventions, do you take time to kind of make your way through Artist Alley and try and scope out fresh talent, or is it more at this point you guys are big enough where people are coming to you all the time?
It's the latter for us now.
It is,
I mean, people, you know, I set up down here and I'm trying to sell books, and I run into that conflict all the time because people want to talk to me about, you know, me picking up their book or talk to them, hiring them, and I'm trying to sell to fans, you know. And so it's always a mixed bag, but that's just con life, you know.
That's
I
do
do 20 of these shows a year.
Yeah.
So.
Oh wow. Dang.
Yeah.
Do you know of any like free online tools or maybe communities that, you know, are focused on helping up and coming comic artists and writers?
There's Sequential Art. There's a page, Sequential Art something, that is a really good one. I know DeviantArt has a lot of communities. I know Line Webtoon, actually, we've done some stuff with those guys. They have a lot of tools in there that help create webcomics, and there's some feedback and some mechanisms for that. I don't know so much about some of the other platforms, but a lot of it is peer-reviewed, you know, I mean, and there are plenty of, and a lot of it is, if you can do something stylistically that's exciting to look at. I mean, I see artists all the time that I don't think are actually very good artists, but they're successful. You know what I mean? But it's certainly an opinion. You know?
Yeah, well, when you're making content, and even more, there's fine art and there's crazy, modern art and things you can do. But when you're doing comics, you are delivering a message and you're telling a story, and so it's about more like advertising almost. It seems how much you can distill that message down, how much punch you can pack into each frame.
And I love comics. It's one of the few venues where you can use an extended narrative with a visual. And I use narrative to tell what the character's thinking. And it's fun for me to see what the character's thinking versus what they're actually saying. And that's a fun realm for playing and writing. And you can't do that as much in film and TV.
Right.
I actually, this was something interesting to me that someone was saying thought bubbles are appearing less and less. We're getting a lot more action, a lot more dialogue, but we're getting a lot less insight into what comic characters are thinking these days. Is that a trend that's real that you've noticed?
For some, I think thought bubbles used to be a big thing, but no one really uses them anymore. I use narrative for that. Like the captions, the little rectangular ones.
Yeah,
And so you can either do that as a first-person narrative, and that's usually what I'll do. Is I'll take the main character and tell kind of the story of what's going on in their head, and you can use that for relating certain plot points. And I think the mistake some writers use is they use that for info dump.
Yeah.
In comics, we're kind of used to compressed storytelling because you never know how long you're going to be able to write, so you try to get everything in there as quickly as possible. But that, I think, is a mistake, especially a lot of young writers make.
Yeah.
Just putting too many words on the page.
Yeah.
Because it really is, for comics specifically, it's a visual medium, and you want to let the art speak for itself.
Have you seen any comics recently, anyone you've come across or anyone that has come to you that you want to publish that's done something like really just unseen before?
No.
No.
And I'll tell you the thing. I'm looking for that.
Yeah.
I tell you, there is some person out there that will finally crack how to do a proper digital comic. I have yet to see it.
What do you think of those moving Korean horror comics?
They're those
They're a little spoopy.
motion comics have been around for a while. Here's the problem with motion comics is no one wants to pay for them.
Yeah.
The thing is they're expensive to make, but people don't actually want to pay for them. People will pay for the pan and scan stuff you see on Comixology and stuff like that, or pay for a PDF.
Okay.
But to me, that's just regurgitating the existing art form the way we do it already.
That's right.
There is a little bit of the zoom in on the panels, so it's easier to read.
Yeah.
I think comics are interesting because some people don't, like my wife has a hard time reading some of the comics I write because she's used to the Sunday funnies where it's like a cross and it's just you read at the top. When you do a comic and you have to follow kind of a Z pattern around the page, people that aren't used to reading comics sometimes don't know how to read them.
Yeah. It seems like, over the past 20, 30 years, with the onset of all, our tablets and this new technology, comics have sort of been moving into the digital platform. Do you see comics always sort of having this classic home in the physical print, or do you see more and more it's just going to go to the digital side of things?
When digital started, Comixology is 10 years old now, and they're sort of the big purveyor of it.
Yeah.
Everyone was decrying the failure of print or the doom of print, and
it was just because it was so new. Do you think people are getting used to it now? It's just
we're selling more
norm?
books. We're selling more print books now than they did 10 years ago.
Oh, really?
So, and
really?
part of people are finding these things in digital because it's easier and more accessible.
Yes.
And then they become a fan, and then they want the book, the hardcover, because then they want to get it signed.
Right.
I've signed some people's iPads, like they have the back of the iPad, and they want it signed because they read digital comics.
That's where it is.
Cool.
But you can't do that really for everybody. So it's just like the idea of going to a concert. The music is free, and then you pay to go to the concert. So if you're there's the industry has become sort of cheap. Introductory and added like user-friendly content, like you get a lot of content for cheap, or it's high-end like hardcovers and stuff like that, where you pay. You're a big fan of this, so therefore you're willing to spend $50 on a hardcover because you want to meet the person that makes it and get them to sign it.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, you've given us incredible insight in this interview, and I appreciate it so much. I hope that if you guys have friends out there trying to break into the comic industry, share this link, let them see. Any last bit of advice before we wrap up?
I would say, if you want to write, you want to be an artist, you need to do it every day. It is amazing how many excuses I find from people who say this is their life stream, but they draw maybe 3 times a year, and I'm like, it's not your life stream if you're not passionate about it. So passion goes a long way. Passion and humility are great things.
Absolutely, in any industry. Thank you so much for your insight, Matt. Thanks, future guys. We'll be right back with lots more from New York Comic Con and comics coming right